In a dusty village, Adhama, a dreamer who sang for her mother, was sold into a joyless marriage to settle her father's debt. Forced to wed Medivh, a grime-covered enigma dismissed as a poor farmer, she believed her hopes were buried. Yet beneath his silence lies a secret so shocking it could unravel the village's cruel whispers. As Adhama steps into a clay house with a heavy heart, she enters a tale of hidden truths and unexpected love. What begins as a funeral for dreams becomes the seed of a story that will make an entire community bow in awe that a young woman from a poor village was compelled to wed a man believed to be destitute, unaware he was secretly a billionaire. Adhama yearned for a modest life, singing for her mother, caring for the garden, and longing for genuine love. However, her father, Bachari, was a severe, curt man, his head bowed, not in humility but in disgrace, indebted to the village chief, a figure more feared than admired. Bachari chose to settle his debt by giving away his daughter, seeing Adhama not as a person with dreams, but as a means to restore his tarnished honor. Thus, she was thrust into an arranged marriage, devoid of music, festivity, or happiness. The groom, Medivh, was a quiet, enigmatic man, always covered in grime, known to no one in the village. To the community, he was merely another poor farmer, unnoticed like dust on the path. Adhama departed with a heavy heart, convinced her aspirations were forever lost. Yet, unbeknownst to her, she was entering a tale too extraordinary for the village to imagine, filled with secrets, silence, and a truth that would upend everything. A young woman traded to clear a debt, a man concealing more than the dirt on his soles, and a love that would emerge where none thought possible. This is where our story begins. On the wedding day, the sun seemed to taunt Adhama's sorrow, blazing brightly and scorching the brows of onlookers gathered at the village entrance. There were no drums, no songs, no joy, the air thick and still, as if the birds themselves honored the somber mourning of this forced union. The cake was just dry cornbread on a woven mat, with crooked, old candles barely standing beside a gourd of well water meant to sanctify the marriage. No flowers were offered, no songs were sung. Children played, kicking stones and laughing, oblivious to the burden weighing on Adhama's fragile frame. She wore borrowed, stained dress with a veil so thin it seemed more suited for wiping sweat. Her eyes were empty, like a parched field after a drought, devoid of hope or light. Each step toward the man her father selected felt like interring a fragment of her soul. Medivh, the groom, stood motionless, hands still, face unadjusted, staring at the ground as if counting passing ants, detached from the moment. Whispers spread among the crowd. A joyless marriage leads to a lifeless existence. An elderly woman muttered, "She'll fade like a flower in embers." When a village chief raised a dry branch to finalize the union, Adhama's body quivered, her legs nearly collapsing, but she steadied herself, picturing her mother's face. Her father, arms folded, observed from afar, his tight lips concealing his fear of dissent. To him, it was a transaction completed, a debt cleared, his shame cleansed through his daughter's sacrifice. The few attendees clapped without warmth or rhythm, each sound striking Adhama like a blow, reminding her that no one valued her worth, her dreams, or the Sunday she spent singing hopeful verses to her mother by the fire. After the ceremony, silence replaced music, settling like dust in their footsteps. Neighbors returned home with empty pots, murmuring, "When the poor wed, even God stays silent." Men dispersed, some chuckling, others shaking their heads, certain the tale would end in ruin or desertion. Adhama walked with her head bowed, lifting her dress to avoid tripping on stones, while Medivh trailed slowly, dragging his feet, a sack of corn slung over his shoulder like another weight to bear. They exchanged no glances, no touch, appearing as strangers bound to the same fate. Passing her father's gate, Adhama glanced back to see her mother standing still, clutching her chest, as if to keep her heart from breaking. In that moment, Adhama realized silently that this marriage wasn't the start of a shared life, but the beginning of a lonely path, paved with her own tears. As she walked, the dress grew heavy with dust, each step a quiet plea to God for mercy, begging not to let her perish in sorrow before understanding her humiliation's purpose. By the time she reached the road's end, the village voices had faded, leaving only her heartbeat, pounding with a warning that something was terribly wrong, yet strangely right, in a way only time could reveal. As the last onlookers scattered, only her footsteps' echo lingered, carried away by a dry wind that swept up the last wilted petals tossed carelessly. It wasn't a wedding, but a funeral for dreams. Yet, the village's elder women say, in every burial, God sows a hidden seed, sprouting only when pain becomes faith and silence becomes courage. Thus ended the joyless wedding, marking the threshold where Adhama buried her girlhood and unknowingly began the rise of a woman who would one day make the village bow in respect, swallowing their cruel laughter. The walk to the house where Adhama would spend her first night felt endless, not due to distance, but because time stretched, prolonging her torment. Stones bruised her weary feet, her dress snagged on thorns, and the silence between her and Mediva was so dense their thoughts seemed to scream within. When they arrived, the moon hung high, casting a cold glow on the straw roof, shadows dancing like ancient spirits. The clay house bore deep cracks like open wounds, with a single crooked wooden door and a small window draped with tattered cloth. Adhama paused at the entrance, her chest heaving, her heart desperate to flee to her mother's arms. But her legs were rigid, heavy, nearly powerless. Mediva pushed the door open wordlessly, its creak piercing the night, startling even the crickets. Inside, darkness consumed everything, like a void in the world, filled with the scent of corn, old smoke, and damp earth. The floor was cold, packed dirt, and in the corner lay a mattress, so thin it seemed a mere cloth over the ground, covered by a torn blanket stained with tales of restless nights. Mediva entered first, dropping his corn sack, removing his shirt, and standing silently, gazing at the floor as if counting dust specks. Adhama lingered in the doorway, clutching her arms to steady her trembling body, more from fear than cold. He turned slowly, each movement heavy, giving her a fleeting glance, like a stranger's accidental eye contact. Then, in a whisper, he said, "You don't owe me anything." Adhama blinked, bewildered, expecting a harsh touch or commanding voice, as village women had warned in hushed kitchen talks. But those words shattered something inside her, crumbling her mountain of fear into dust. Mediva moved to a corner, spread a small mat, and lay down facing the wall, his breathing heavy but not aggressive, carrying no desire or malice, only a burdened silence holding stories she wasn't ready to grasp. She cautiously approached the mattress, sat with care, eyes on her hands, her body still shaking, but her heart now beating in a new, confused rhythm, trying to understand this man. She glanced at the ceiling, whispering faintly, "Thank you, God, for sparing me shame today." The night dragged on, wind whistling through wall cracks, a mournful sound. Adhama pulled the blanket tighter, closing her eyes, but sleep eluded her. Every noise, a snapping branch, creaking wood, jolted her. Mediva remained still, respecting the invisible boundary between them. In the night's depth, she heard a heavy sigh, like suppressed tears. Turning, she saw him trembling under his blanket, and though she considered asking if he needed help, she stayed silent, sensing his pain was as deep as the house's cracks. At the rooster's first crow, Adhama was still awake, her face swollen from withheld tears, eyes fixed on the window's slit, seeking a sign, a light, an answer. Mediva rose before dawn, rolled up his mat, donned his worn shirt, and left without a word. Adhama sat, hugging her knees, feeling cold climb her legs, unsure whether to weep or give thanks, uncertain if she was captive or guest. That night, without a touch, she learned something her father could never comprehend, the power of silent respect. The clay house became a silent sanctuary, each breath a plea for mercy, the thin mattress an altar of endurance. The dark corner of the stage where Adhama began to see that care often comes not in touch, but in the space given to exist. Rising to heat water, her face showed fear and relief, and deep in her eyes, a spark of curiosity flickered about the man who slept on the floor to preserve her dignity. As the sun pierced the sky, Mediva was already gone, the rooster's call lingering among the palms as he left with his hoe and a bag of rags for lunch. From the clay house, Adhama heard his fading steps and felt a tightness in her chest, not longing or fear, but a quiet question. What lies behind his silence? Each morning, she was alone, wrapped in a smoky, earthy blanket, slowly sweeping the floor, arranging utensils, tending the yard. The house's silence was so profound the broom's sound felt like thunder. From afar, she heard women at the well, laughing about weddings, births, and quarrels, never speaking of her kindly, always saying she would mute. She'll wither away. At first, Adhama lacked the courage to cook for him, fearing rejection or indifference. But one afternoon, as the sky turned clay-colored and rain scented the air, she made thin porridge from flour in a cracked pot, nearly water, but her first gift. She set it on a dented plate with a cup of water on the uneven table. When Medivh returned, caked in dirt, he entered slowly, glanced at the plate, then at her. Adhama sat in a corner, twisting her scarf. Without a word, he sat, ate slowly, as if savoring each grain, and nodded, a gesture that felt like a whispered thank you in the dark. From then on, it became routine. She cooked small portions, tasteless rice, watery cassava soup, a few beans, and he ate deliberately, thanking her with a look or nod before sitting outside, gazing at the horizon until night. The villagers, eager for gossip, spun tales, one woman with a sharp tongue claiming Adhama was a prisoner, her husband mute and foolish, starving and weeping nightly. They laughed by the well, heedless of the pain their words inflicted. One day, gathering firewood in the forest, Adhama overheard two women mocking. She thinks she's married, but she's wed to loneliness, to silence. The words stabbed her, and for a moment, she wished to disappear, but she continued, eyes down, hands steady, her heart bleeding quietly. Returning home, she saw Medivh cleaning his hoe, face sunburned, eyes lowered. She set the firewood down, entered the kitchen, and prepared soup, stirring it gently as steam rose like a prayer. Medivh sat in his corner, waiting. When the soup was ready, she served it and sat across from him, eating together for the first time. No words passed, but in that silence, something shifted, their eyes meeting with unasked questions. In the days that followed, Adhama observed more. Medivh's pre-dawn departures, his cracked, bleeding hands, the heavier silence each evening. At night, she heard his dragging steps, the splash of washing feet, his tired sigh before lying on his mat. In their daily rhythm, she realized his silence wasn't his pain's source, but a world he carried alone. Slowly, she admired this dirt-covered man, quiet yet whole, returning daily despite exhaustion. Under a full moon, Adhama sat at the door, staring at the stars, praying for his wounded hands and unknown heart, thanking God for his restraint, his respect, more valuable than gold, a shared soup more meaningful than a false feast. The villagers' mockery faded, and in the clay house, a wordless story began, seen only by those who've known deep pain. Time in the village was marked not by clocks, but by roosters, hoes, and dusk fires. Adhama and Medivh built a quiet routine. She cooked, cleaned, cared. He left early, returned weary, always silent. Their marriage was mute, two ghosts bound together. But change came on a cold, windy night when Adhama woke burning with fever, collapsing on the dirt floor, breathless, the world spinning. Medivh, hearing her fall, rushed to her, his silence turning to urgency. He lifted her gently, like a fragile bird, laid her on the mattress, tucked her in, and ran into the night. He returned with herbs, heating water, crushing leaves, filling the house with a bitter scent. He moistened her lips carefully, wiping her brow, staying by her side, holding her hand, murmuring prayers or confessions. When she trembled, he adjusted her blanket. When she coughed, he stroked her hair, his grip saying, "I'm here." He stayed awake, the fire fading, the night crawling slowly. At dawn, Adhama opened weak eyes, seeing Medivh, red-eyed, exhausted. She whispered, Why are you kind when I was forced upon you?" He didn't answer, only squeezed her hand, wiping her tear, a gesture truer than words. That moment dissolved her fear, shame, and resentment, revealing a man bearing unseen burdens, loving without demand. Their silence became a bridge, not a wall. Adhama greeted him with water, their evenings a quiet rest, her mending scars as he sharpened his hoe. The village women still mocked, calling her mad, a widow to a living man, but she ignored them, focused on understanding this man of silent love. On the last night before the harvest cycle, watching him sleep, she recalled her father, her mother, the village's cruelty, and her childhood promises of love and happiness. In the mud, she realized Madiva's care had unlocked her heart, showing dignity lies in quiet respect, not in celebrations or riches. The next morning, she rose unafraid of the cold floor, preparing herbal water, smiling as Mediva woke, their shared silence blooming with love no one would believe. Weeks flowed like a quiet river, rains washing the roads, leaving reflective puddles. Adhama moved through the house with belonging, her touch tender on every utensil. Mediva's routine persisted, but his silence carried new warmth. One day, cleaning an untouched corner, Adhama found a broken-locked wooden chest, her heart racing with curiosity and fear. Inside were letters, contracts, photos of Mediva in fine suits, a gold ring with M.A. engraved. The paper spoke of wealth, farms, and city meetings, revealing a past life. Questions flooded her. Who is he? Why hide here? She imagined his abandoned world of luxury, traded for clay and solitude. She hid the chest, keeping the secret like a sacred wound. That night, Mediva sensed her changed gaze, but said nothing, eating silently, his hands trembling. Adhama felt only compassion, guarding his secret like a precious seed, believing it held a greater truth. She prayed, "May God protect the man you are, not the world's version," beginning to see him truly, preparing for an unforeseen destiny. One morning, heavy clouds hinted at secrets, warm wind lifting dust. Adhama heard cruel laughter from two women, mocking her misery and Mediva's silence. Their words cut deep, her spoon falling, rage and pain surging. Mediva, overhearing, dropped his hoe and marched to the village square, his silence breaking. He spoke loudly. "You mock her, ignorant of a clean soul's worth. She's richer than you, with courage you lack." The village froze, his words echoing, shaming the mockers. Adhama watched, trembling, tears falling but proud. They held hands silently, their touch a vow against the world, their soup that night salted with new hope. Mediva smiled, a treasure beyond gold, their house now a fortress of silent music. Days after, rumors faded, Adhama stepped firmer, her silence a shield. Her mother, Aminata, lay ill, frail on a creaking mat. Mediva, seeing Adhama's distant gaze, understood her worry without words. That night, he left, returning with herbs, preparing tea for Aminata in secret, tending her gently. He continued daily, enduring Bathory's disdain in the fields, never complaining. Adhama, hearing more mockery, found solace in Mediva's embrace, his silence full of meaning. Aminata recovered slowly, praising Mediva's soul. Their love grew in quiet acts, unseen by the village, a bond of dignity and care. One day, a car arrived, a suited man calling, "Dr. Mediva, return to the city." Adhama's heart stopped, Mediva's hope fell. The man revealed Mediva's wealth, shocking the village. Mediva confessed, "I came to be seen as a man, not money," offering Adhama the ring, affirming his true love. She wept, torn but grateful, choosing to stay by him. He declared her choice his future, silencing the suited man. Adhama's grip on his hand sealed their bond, a new story born. The next day, the suited man offered a city life, but Mediva insisted on taking Aminata and helping the village. Adhama agreed, demanding to leave as a whole woman. Aminata blessed her, and under the moon, they vowed to transform lives. Adhama no longer a traded coin, but a rooted strength. Months later, they left with Aminata, entering the city with wonder but resolve. Mediva used his wealth humbly, Adhama his equal in decisions. They returned with trucks of supplies, building wells, schools, and gardens, Mediva's voice now free, Adhama forgiving past mockers. Aminata watched, fulfilled, while Bathory withered alone. Adhama, harvesting corn, smiled at Mediva, knowing true wealth was the love that covered her on the coldest night. The village, once cruel, now honored them. Adhama the flower from clay, their story a lesson in silent love, shared with all.